Everybody, and welcome to a beautiful Friday in May in the great state of Oregon. My name is Joth Rickey. I'm the president and CEO of Dutch Bros Coffee and also your chair of the Oregon Business Plan. Welcome to another session of the Oregon Business Plan series with our congressional delegation. For the past several years, leaders from the Oregon Business Plan have traveled to Washington, D.C. to discuss our priorities with our congressional delegation. The Portland Business Alliance, Oregon Business and Industry, and the Oregon Business Council have actively participated, and we've been joined with business leaders from around the state. Last year, sadly, we canceled that trip in the wake of the COVID crisis, and this year we've decided to conduct it virtually through a series of interviews with our delegation. This series is very timely. As you probably know, we refreshed the Oregon Business Plan this past year. At the virtual summit last December, we presented our vision for shared prosperity and called out 3 imperatives and recommended actions to achieve it, to advance it. Those 3 imperatives were economic development, about how we grow, create, and attract good jobs; workforce and education, where we prepare Oregonians for the jobs of today and tomorrow; and economic mobility, providing supports that enhance access to opportunities. The federal government is playing an outsized role in recovery from the pandemic, and the perspective of our delegation is valuable as we look ahead. Today, I'm pleased that Senator Ron Wyden has agreed to participate in a discussion about the plan and what the federal government can do to advance it. The senator really needs no introduction. Senator Wyden has long been a champion for the Oregon Business Plan, and after helping to launch the Oregon Business Plan Leadership Summit in 2002, the senator has never missed an annual summit. For over 20 years, Senator Wyden has worked to help Oregon thrive. I personally can speak to that he was in Grants Pass about 3 weeks ago, meeting with leaders from around the Southern Oregon area, and I think I was a wall away from him at that time. The senator serves on the committees of Finance, Budget, Intelligence and Energy, and Natural Resources. He is the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee and senior member of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. We look forward to hearing his ideas on how to best advance the business plan's agenda for shared prosperity. Penny Serurier, co-managing partner of Stoll Reeves Portland office, has joined us today to interview Senator Wyden. Penny's experience in higher education, healthcare, and nonprofit consulting has helped her to understand the regulatory and economic challenges nonprofits face. Unsurprisingly, Penny has been named Best Lawyers Oregon Lawyer of the Year in Nonprofit and Charity Law for several years running. Welcome, Penny. Take it away, and thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joth, and welcome, Senator Wyden. Thank you again for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us today. We really appreciate it. I wanted to start with a general question. I know you have been an elected official, I think, for nearly 40 years. And this year marks, again, a repeat of the pinnacle, chair of the Senate Finance Committee, one of the most powerful positions in Congress. And as Senate Finance Committee chair, your committee has jurisdiction over taxes, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, trade policy, and more. Can you tell us what your top priorities are for the committee's work and how those priorities will help shape Oregon and the rest of the country?
Penny, yes, and it's great to be back. I do want to tell you, I've just been from the ear, nose, and throat fella, and I'm so full of sprays that I'm going to be gulping water every 15, 20 seconds to do this. He said, "Are you really going to do this?" And I'll start with the first gulp. And I said, I never miss meeting with these wonderful people of the business plan. You know, for those of you that don't know the history, Duncan Wise never thought that this would go anywhere. It was snowing, it was raining, it was beat the band more than 2 decades ago. I called him up and said, "Dunk, this is really sad." You know, we were so excited. And we pulled in, it was icing and all the rest. And I go, oh, I don't know how we'll recover from this. This is the first one. Supposed to have people from 36 counties. We walk in, and Duncan and I see more than 500 people from all 36 counties. So what a compliment to all of you and Bill Thorndike, and there are so many wonderful people. And here's what I'll tell you by way of the Finance Committee. My priority is to do everything I can to set the business climate so that Oregon can dig out of the worst public health crisis in a century. And we all know that unemployment and tough times have hit Oregon like a wrecking ball. Actually, a lot of the data shows that the metropolitan area has been hurt more than the rural communities. And I think we can make a diagnosis of that in terms of hospitality and tourism and things like that. But there's a lot of heavy lifting to do. And let me kind of start with the strategy for more high skill, high wage jobs. We're going to bring the China bill to the floor of the Senate this upcoming week, Senate rules permitting. And it's all about outcompeting China. I think we can outcompete anybody in the world if there's a level playing field. But the fact is, the Chinese government, not the people of China, the Chinese government has feasted on flaws in the global trading system. And so that's part of what we're going to be doing with the China bill. We'll be working on the supply chain. That's hugely been important for Oregon with difficulty getting access to PPP. We're going to try to level the playing field in terms of environmental protection because we've seen some of the rapacious practices with China in terms of our natural resources. So that's a big part of the next couple of weeks. It also is a segue to Build Back Better, or the jobs package, which is infrastructure, which also, as you know, is being debated. For example, a number of my colleagues feel very strongly about semiconductors. We all know that Intel is our largest, biggest private sector employer. Intel and Oregon companies feel very strongly about tax credits and tax incentives, which to our good fortune goes to the Senate Finance Committee, where I'm the chair. So we're very well positioned for that. This first bill deals with the fact that some parts of the country that are looking at memory chips and related kinds of issues, domestic manufacturing, are looking at grants. There's been less interest in Oregon in that. So these two packages are very much related. Other priorities of mine are especially small business. Oregon is overwhelmingly a small business state. I've been really happy that the business plan has joined us in the past, looking at tax incentives that really speak to the BIPOC community and others that care about small business. So outcompeting China, small business. A third area would clearly be controlling healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are gobbling up everything in sight. We'll be focused on prescription drugs. Housing would be a fourth area that I feel strongly about. I'm sure those following the discussion have heard of something called LIHTC, the Low Income Housing Tax Credit. I'm proposing something, Penny, called MITEC, the Middle Income Housing Tax Credit, so that a firefighter and a nurse are going to have a chance to be part of the American dream. And then finally, and I really want to credit Maria Pope for her outstanding work as the CEO of our leading utility, for working with me on clean energy policy. I have proposed, as the chair of the committee, taking the 44 separate tax breaks for energy and throwing them in the garbage can, because they're just from yesteryear. They're outdated. And I want to substitute three: one for clean energy, clean transportation, energy efficiency, and have marketplace competition, a free enterprise system in order to have the incentive that really matters for this century, and that's reducing carbon. So that's a handful of our priorities. And we'll also be very involved in the childcare space. And I'm going to use a word that you won't hear Democrats use very often. The childcare issue is now, in my view, first and foremost a supply side problem. And I'm using those words deliberately. It is a supply side problem. We need more facilities. We need to rehab existing facilities. We need new facilities. We need a variety of additional facilities in order to meet the great need. And in the Valley, the big three are really, jobs and housing and childcare. And all of them relate to this question of high-skilled, high-wage jobs and business productivity. I just finished off 13 town meetings at home, and people say, Ron, what does this childcare have to do with infrastructure? It's the bridge to more productivity, and we can't get high-skill, high-wage workers, and our employers desperately need them. They have no way to take care of the little ones.
Yeah.
It was a longer answer maybe than you wanted, but that's my take.
Well, full agenda, let's just say. That's pretty, that's amazing. And you've touched on a number of categories that we're going to ask you about in a minute, a little more in depth. But I want to turn to COVID just specifically. A couple of the measures you've mentioned, the proposed bills, support for small businesses, of course, housing, those initiatives, and childcare and healthcare are all going to help Oregon recover from the COVID pandemic and the economic crisis that has resulted. Can you speak a little bit about steps that you would see Oregon taking, or the federal government helping Oregon take, to help us dig ourselves out of this COVID mire?
Well, the big need, both from an economic standpoint, quality of life standpoint, the potential for the kids, is to get them back into school safely. I know of no higher kind of priority. And, we were in a situation that I think a lot of Oregonians were very exasperated about here shortly, where it seemed like we were pitting the teachers against the seniors, and that Oregonians are having this debate. And I'm running around to town meetings and people say, Ron, what's this about? And I said, look, I'm not the one who makes those calls. Under the Constitution, there's a police power function that you're a real lawyer, Penny. I'm a lawyer in name only. The difference between a senator and a local official really is that, police power function. I said, look, and I'm not going to get all political here. Donald Trump should have used the Defense Production Act in order to create more opportunities for vaccines and PPE and the like. And we wouldn't have faced this challenge, in my view, in Oregon and elsewhere, where we had this big shortage of PPE and we're pitting seniors against teachers and the like. Well, election's over. I've told you about something that I thought was holding Oregon back, and got some pretty good news in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
We made enough progress that the CDC is indicating, look, if you've been vaccinated, you can feel a lot better about going indoors. That is welcome news to those who are members of the Oregon, business plan. We got ways to go in the state. I think we're all dealing with the fact that particularly in rural areas, there hasn't been the pickup that we might have liked on vaccines. I'll tell you, I'm not completely sure some of the educational approaches on vaccines made sense. I went to school on a basketball scholarship. I was dreaming of playing in the NBA. I don't take a backseat to anybody in terms of the role of athletes and the like. But what we did is, for months and months, we saw celebrities and athletes and everybody's getting the jab in the arm. They said, get the jab and all the rest. Not enough was done to really make people feel comfortable about what was happening and how this was going to be something that wouldn't put them at risk and the like. I think that too is going to change. We're going to see some vans coming in Oregon. We're going to see more peer-to-peer work. Looking back is always easy. So the big role for the federal government right now is providing help to get the schools, funding for PPE, using the Defense, Production Act, trying to get the tools so that we hit that 70% target, which I guess the governor talked about yesterday.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to infrastructure, one of your favorite topics, I know. So President Biden has proposed a tax package that will affect businesses directly in terms of how the package is paid. We have a few questions from our audience related to that. But before we get to how we're going to pay for them, maybe if you could speak to what your priorities are in that infrastructure package, and then talk to how those priorities are going to be paid for.
Yeah. Well, there are two sides to the equation. There is conventional infrastructure, roads and bridges and rail and ports and airports, hugely important for Oregon. You can't have big league economic growth with little league roads and ports and the like. And I'll be playing in a very active way. There's great interest in something Oregon used extensively in 2009 called Build America bonds. And I created these things. I'd been out pounding the pavement with a bipartisan bill for years, up till 2009. I was a pretty junior member of the Finance Committee. And Max Baucus and Chuck Grassley said, well, Ron's a good guy. You know, he works in a bipartisan way. He's always got ideas. Let's hear about this Build America bond. The federal government had never bonded before. So I said, we only got a year and a half. I think the country might sell $3-4 billion worth of these. Everybody goes, wow, never bonded before, $3-4 billion worth. In a year and a half, America sold $183 billion worth of Build America bonds. So there's a market here for well-targeted public-private investments in infrastructure. So I'm the author of them. Comes before the Finance Committee. Richard Neal, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, which we have the good fortune of having Congressman Blumenauer serve on, is for them. So we're going to be focused on conventional infrastructure, and then I want to make the case for what is really human services infrastructure in areas like childcare and home and community-based services. I mean, what's home and community-based services about? A lot of people, I mean, we can have a big debate about the unemployment issue. I think most of the people who follow the plan know that I wrote the $600 extra in the spring of 2020. I say to myself, if Oregon had not had that money, and it was more than $2 billion, I don't know how a lot of people in Oregon in April, May, and June of 2020 could have paid the bills. I don't know how they could have paid rent. And by the way, I was working as hard for employers to get the tax write-off for PPP and the employee retention tax credit and the like. But if we don't do something about the human side of infrastructure, childcare, home and community-based services, a lot of our best workers find it really hard to get out of the house because they got somebody sick at home, somebody disabled at home. And we understand what the demographics of our century is all about. More older people who want to be cared for at home, particularly given what we saw in the spring of 2020. So I'm not going to say we should go out now and invest in every possible thing anybody ever dreamed up in the federal government. But things like childcare and home and community-based services are a part of the human investments in infrastructure, which I think are directly related, inextricably linked to productivity, high skill, high wage jobs in the private economy. Pay for it real quickly. Everybody is going to have to pay their fair share. And maybe some of your listeners heard about the discussion this week. The press came up to me and said, I want a balanced bill. Everybody's going to have to pay. Ron, what do you think about the fact that a bunch of the conservative Republicans said that the big corporations aren't going to pay anything? I said, read me their quote. They said they're not going to pay a penny. I go, let me see if I get this right. The biggest of the big, and by the way, Oregon has mostly small companies, as we said, who need infrastructure. You got a quote from the biggest of the big companies and their elected officials. They weren't going to pay a penny. So they're going to use roads, use bridges, use transportation system, not pay a penny. I said, look, I'm going to do everything I can to get a bipartisan bill. I usually get a lot of flack for being too bipartisan. You know, when I tried to do Medicare reform with House Speaker Paul Ryan, I think people said, Ron's not even going to live to tell about that one. So I'm going to try to find common ground, but everybody's going to have to pay their fair share of penny. And then, by the way, that's the Oregon way. If Mark Hatfield or Tom McCall or Vera Katz, you know, people in rural areas love Vera Katz. They said she's liberal, but she always works for the state. People like Tom McCall, Mark Hatfield, Vera Katz, others the business plan have worked with, they'd always say everybody's got to pay their fair share. And that's going to be my answer on the infrastructure side. And by the way, a bit of good news, I got an agreement to get started on the multinational piece. Again, beyond what a lot of Oregon small businesses are.
Right.
I got an agreement between Mark Warner, who arguably is the most pro-business senator, and Sherrod Brown, who's arguably the most pro-labor member for the pay-fors. And to give you an idea how strongly I felt about it, when I got their agreement, I said, I'm going to announce it tomorrow so you guys don't have any time to change your mind, because all the lobbyists will tell you shouldn't do it.
Nice work. Good.
We got a long way to go before anybody can start pulling down bouquets, but these are principles I think that have been part of the business plan. I love the fact that you're talking about shared prosperity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not particularly different than the Biden tagline, build back better. I mean,
yeah.
I have to find some unifying principles.
Yeah.
I know the right isn't going to like it and the left isn't going to like it.
Right, right. So what are your thoughts then on us? I would say most in the audience would agree that everyone has to pay. Of course, that's easy to say and harder to implement. In particular, tell me your thoughts about business taxes and the necessary business investment. So earlier you spoke about creating a pro-business or a healthy business environment. And what about the concern that additional taxes on businesses and business structure will make us less competitive in the global markets?
Well, right now, we're not close to being near the top on the OECD countries if you're talking, you know, national. Oregon is mostly small businesses. Most of those small businesses, as we know, pay taxes as individuals. When Joe Biden signaled that nobody with an income less than $400,000 is going to face a tax hike, that's also a pretty big signal to small businesses in Oregon and pass-throughs and the like. Now, the multinationals and the big guys, we have some big guys. Between 2018 and 2017, after the 2017 tax bill, they got an enormous tax cut. They're going to have to pay their fair share. I think they're certainly going to be able to, to be competitive. But Mark Warner, most pro-business senator, and Sherrod Brown and I all agreed we're going to take away the tax break 2017 specifically for setting up a tax factory overseas. For closing a factory in the United States and setting up one overseas, I don't know how you can't come to one of my town meetings and make a case for that.
Yeah, I get that. So let's talk for a minute about SALT, state and local tax. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether you favor reinstating the state and local tax deduction. Of course, that would help Oregon in an outsized way, given the imbalance in our state tax structure. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Well, I want everybody to know how this happened. This was not about economics in 2017. It was part of the 2017 tax bill. Donald Trump wanted to punish blue states and give a break to red states. And that's not what my politics is all about. I want everybody in America to get ahead. So I do think there should be relief from SALT. There's going to have to be a pay for it. Part of the SALT debate is that the majority leader in the United States Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives both come from states where there are high taxes. So you certainly are going to see them push it. I will, as is usually the case on these things, be tasked with trying to figure out some of the revenue things, and this is not going to be a walk in the park.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So, Senator, we have a few questions from the audience.
Good.
And I have another.
Business plan town meeting.
Yeah, business plan town meeting. I want to welcome Carla Chambers, who is the co-owner and vice president of Stallbush Island Farms. Carla has a couple of those questions for you, and I'll let her take it from here.
Good morning, Senator.
Hey, Carla.
How are you?
Well, allergists and ear, nose, and throat people notwithstanding, I'm always happy to be with business plan folks and you.
Oh, good. Well, couple questions this morning from the audience. One regarding the Finance Committee hearing this last week, and trade done right, the comment on trade done right. And there was an interest in you really educating us on that comment. I specifically appreciate your comments regarding China this morning. And then I'd like you to add on to that question. You know, we have some major transportation issues this morning. Getting ocean going containers, literally getting the containers into the port so we can ship goods for our existing customers is a big problem. And the second big problem is we are already seeing major shipping issues going on to the East Coast associated with that ransomware cyber attack. And I wondered if you would comment on those.
I'm trying to get the whole list. Trade,
Trade and transportation. Yeah.
trade.
We have some really hot issues right now on the transportation side.
And I'll just take your last one first because it doesn't get very much attention. And I'm trying to sound the alarm bell. I do not think anywhere near enough has been done to protect this country's cybersecurity. And I don't know if you caught the big piece. It was like in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal. You know, they basically were saying, I've been screaming my lungs out about this for years because I'm on the Intelligence Committee. My older child calls it the so-called Intelligence Committee. But the country's known about this problem. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it was either the Wall Street Journal or New York Times that Ron Wyden said that people were peddling, you know, happy talk years ago rather than playing hardball. Now, to bring it into the Northwest, I've had a pretty spirited discussion about Microsoft and their role in SolarWinds because we knew we had those problems that came up in, and I'm not getting into anything classified, in matters associated with a hack at SolarWinds, and they weren't taken care of. And so I want everybody to know, because this is a business issue as well, I am not going to allow any more cyber pork to be doled out that sounds good and sounds like it's going to deal with cybersecurity and doesn't measure up. And I gather that the Colonial, you know, situation is getting worked out and the like, and that's good news. But I will tell you, nowhere near enough has been done to beef up cybersecurity. So that's going to be a big issue. And on the plus side, Oregon's got some firms, because they've talked to me, that feel strongly about taking cybersecurity seriously. So that ought to be a good potential source of employment, high skill, high wage jobs for the state. Carla, apropos of China, I'm probably not able to add a whole lot more to what I said, other than what I've been talking about to the Biden administration is let's use all the tools in the trade toolbox. Donald Trump just had one tool, and it was called a tariff. And look, the Chinese did rip us off in terms of our intellectual property and the like. So there was a role for tariffs. But you can't just say trade is like a vending machine where you put in $1 and outspit all these tariff goodies and say the world's going to be better. Now, one of the pluses in the hearing, which I think is what you're talking about on Wednesday with Catherine Tai, is she did say that she would update the 232 statute, which is the hugely important statute that involves trying to draw the line between exports and trade and the like, and national security issues. And boy, did we see the need for an update in 232 over the last year. So that was a bit of good news. Also, you may have seen, Carla, that Catherine Tai and the Biden administration announced several enforcement actions under the USMCA, which suggests that it's going to be a new day with respect to trade enforcement. Those would be kind of some of my initial issues. One other thing that I know Carla is going to talk about, and I'll get it in under this breath. We have to have a new forestry policy. And Carla is doing some very innovative work trying to drum this up. This week, I'll be introducing my National Prescribed Fire Act, which basically speaks to what we're hearing our scientists, companies, advocates on both sides say we need to do, which is instead of waiting around for an inferno in the summer, when it's hot and dry and you have a lightning strike and boom, everything is bedlam and we're seeing communities wiped out like we saw in Southern Oregon, we should do more carefully controlled burns during the cooler weather months. And I think we'll have bipartisan support for this, this bill. And it's a science-based tool to reduce hazardous fuels. And Weyerhaeuser came out for it the other day, and Defenders of Wildlife came out for it, and the tribal forestry groups, intertribal timber folks came out for it. And I'll be putting it in this week. And to have industry and environmentalists, we'll have bipartisan support for this.
That's great. Well, we need that in the West, and I know you know, but this is a very early farming season, and it's one of Oregon's earliest fire seasons as well. And we, the Oregon Governor's Wildfire Council did some great work, and we know what needs to be done, and we have amazing bipartisan support. We have all the voices around the table, and so thank you for your leadership on that. That is greatly appreciated.
We checked the numbers.
You,
we checked the numbers, Penny. Right now, there are more than 2.5 million acres of hazardous fuel reduction programs that are basically ready to go. Carla and I are also looking at something else, which is that the federal government owes us money in terms of some of the firework, and I hope we'll be able to have something to say. And Carla was the one who alerted me to just how serious the backlog in securing the federal dollars are.
Thank you.
Huge. Thank you. We have another person to introduce to ask a few more questions from the audience. Senator, I'd like to introduce you to Sherry Dunn, who is the CEO and principal of ITBOM Consulting. I have known Sherry now for a few years. She's done a lot of work in the nonprofit space, and we're happy to have her here today.
And unless I'm missing something, Ms. Dunn has been in some of our meetings as well. So I'm happy to have her comment.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Wyden. Thank you so much. And I also sit on the Workforce Talent Development Board for the state. And so my questions are around workforce, obviously, because that's my area. But, at the Oregon Business Plan last year, you talked about turning what we generally call the safety net into an economic mobility escalator. So it's a really nice term and a way to think about it. And we see that as critical for the Oregon Business Plan's vision of shared prosperity, right? We're talking about what does it mean to share prosperity as we come out of COVID and move forward. So there are, I guess, two questions to that. First of all, what changes in policy and program design do you propose or do you think can help advance that shared prosperity? And number two, and I understand this has come up already, one of the issues around shared prosperity, especially for women and low income people, is childcare. And what do you think the odds are that we have, it feels like we have this once in a generation shot to really do something big around childcare, and how do you think that could tie into that equitable prosperity?
Well, I think it's apropos of the last point was done. I think it's a linchpin to prosperity, because if families, I mean, it's not rocket science. If you have a talented worker that one of our big employers needs desperately and wants to pay them a good wage, but they can't get childcare for a little one, you know, at home, or apropos of home and community-based services for an elder, then they're not in a position to get the job. I mean, it's just not rocket science. So the two areas that I talked about in terms of human services for infrastructure were in fact childcare and home and community-based services. And I have introduced legislation on the childcare issue already, and one of the ringleaders in the effort for home and community-based services. And I'll give you a little hint of what I'm going to try to do on the home and community-based services, because I was dreaming about doing this when I was director of the Gray Panthers, and that is, in an aging society, one of the great frustrations for families is how do they figure out and who do they ask about what is the proper placement for an elder? Is it best for them to get home care? Is it best for them to get nursing home care? Would an assisted living facility sort of, in effect, provide a bridge to the two? You start in the community, then as you need more advanced care. So these policies are very much linked. Now, one other part of what I've been talking about, and I've also already proposed it now, is giving private employers a bigger role in training employees for the jobs of the future. Like, I had a major Oregon employer on the phone just this week with me, and he said he had all these positions and he was frustrated about training and the like. And he said, you know, I can do it myself. And I said to this employer, do you know that I've protected for years now the tax write-off for an employer who goes out and does the training for a worker? And Penny is a real lawyer, and it's under the special provision reasonable and necessary. So if the employer does the training of the worker, someone who's got a high school degree, comes in, passes a drug test, and says, I'm dying to work here, understand that I'm going to start a job that already pays minimum wage, good growth. Will you give me a shot? If that employer says yes to the worker under existing law, which I spent a lot of time protecting, the employer gets to write off the cost of the training. One. Two, I think there should be more ways to get private employers involved in the agenda, you know, you're talking about. And I proposed something called Jobs for Economic Recovery, which provides assistance to, you know, workers and employers when they look to use community colleges and other tools and find work that, you know, again, looks to the future. Too often we've paid scarce government money for jobs that may be almost obsolete by the time the training is done. And Jobs for Economic Recovery specifically looks to using employers and workers who want to be trained for a different type of job. So point well taken, but to tap that potential, that individual worker has got to be able to have childcare, so they're in a position to be in the marketplace. And if they have an elder at home, same thing. They've got to have a way to make sure that their parents or their grandparents aren't going to suffer during their absence.
Yeah, and I really appreciate. Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the way it's being talked about tied to infrastructure, because I think this is a type of thinking, as you probably know already, the United States during World War II actually had universal health care because women had to go to the workforce. So we know how to do it. We have some ideas about it. I appreciate the elder care discussion because I'm in the middle of that situation right now with my mother. So I really appreciate that. And I guess just one final question is, how does this also tie to healthcare? You've talked a lot about, you've been a champion of reducing costs, trying to get access. I know the exchange has done great business recently with being promoted again and people signing up. But what role do you see business playing with trying to bring the cost down and the quality of healthcare? Or is it that we do need to go back again and try to dig down deeper into the exchange now that we have an administration that's wants to use it?
I would like to make exchanges, to have reforms with the exchanges. In particular, and many of you have heard me talk about this, I'd like to make healthcare coverage more portable, because given the number of times a worker is going to change jobs in a modern economy, we've made some progress. We don't, for example, we don't let insurance companies, and frankly, I think sometimes there's some corner cutting here, we don't let them discriminate against somebody with a pre-existing condition. So in a sense, job lock, some of the old job lock isn't there anymore. But still, it's too hard on both healthcare and pensions for workers to be able to have the kind of portability and mobility they would like. So that's number one. Second, I have said, as long as I'm chairman of the finance committee, every single time the committee meets, we're going to be talking about racial disparities in healthcare. And these, as members of the plan know, some of them are really ugly. The maternal mortality numbers are just outrageous. So I was able to get in to the package in March some funding for Medicaid in order to reduce those numbers. But until we do something about what is really the picture in much of America, if you're affluent and you're white and you live in a big fancy suburb, you got a technology treasure trove out there of incredible healthcare services. And a lot of folks in the BIPOC community are living in a healthcare desert. And I'm going to do something about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking my questions.
Awesome, Senator. I'd like to pivot back. We have a few more minutes remaining, and I would like to hear more about the energy tax policy revamp that you have recently proposed. You made headlines in Tax Law 360. I caught that a couple of weeks ago, and which is exciting.
I must have missed that publication.
Well, my understanding from a high level is that your proposal would have our energy sector carbon free by the year 2035, which is a laudable goal and very ambitious. I also understand that the policy would strip away the current subsidies for the traditional carbon fuel industry sectors, and instead invest tax credits in renewable sources without, as I understand it, delineating between the source of the renewable power. So could you just talk a little bit more about this idea and also how it's been received by the Biden administration and whether it has legs?
I think it is very much consistent with what President Biden's talking about. And as far as, the anatomy side of it and political legs, Mike Crapo, who is the senior Republican on the finance committee, and he and I have worked together often, Harvard Law, terrific guy, very, very conservative. And he wants to get things done. We're working together on on memory chips and semis and a whole host of things, telehealth and the like. My sense is that, and Maria Pope, who's been active with the business plan, over the years, has been an enormous help. I mean, she was our witness. In fact, she was really our leadoff witness at our hearing, did a terrific job. We've got a coalition now of the Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, Building Trades, Edison Electric. The electrics feel that if they're going to hit these targets, you were just mentioning, some of the targets everybody's running around talking about, you don't get there unless you bring a lot of reform out of the electric side. So I'm very upbeat about this. We scheduled a markup, what's called kind of processing, a bill for, I guess it'll be 10 days from now. Time's moving, 12 days from now. But I will probably have 18 jillion amendments and we'll have to work through it. But we're at 31 sponsors now. That's not counting Mike Crapo's very good bill. I've got other senators looking at it. So I'm really excited about it. I think this is transformational, transformational stuff. And that's what this session's been all about. People ask me about the first unemployment insurance package. Unemployment insurance was written in 1935. There were not a lot of gig workers in 1935. So what I'm kind of doing is trying to take stuff in a lot of instances from yesteryear and trying to say, if we're going to come out of this thing the way we all want to, which is making sure people are in a position to rebuild their lives, have the shared prosperity, build back better, we got to do some things like bring policies at least into the relevant century. Quaint idea, huh? This century.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. So let's pivot back to Oregon and the sector, I think, of the economy that has been hit hardest through COVID, which is clearly the restaurant, travel, entertainment, and events industry. You just made a reference to the gig economy and a proposal I hadn't heard about. Can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts with respect to what might be coming from the federal government in terms of relief for that sector of the economy and others who were so devastated through COVID?
Are you talking, Penny, are you talking about restaurants and hospitality or gig workers or both?
All of the above, you get to choose.
Well, the restaurant fund is now operational, and I thought I saw a headline this morning before my adventures at EMT saying that they've just been flooded with applications. And I felt from the beginning, by the way, Congressman Blumenauer deserves a lot of credit for this. He was out there early speaking for our restaurants. This is part of Oregon's small business. And, I think, we have taken such pride in the, huge variety of restaurants we've had. They've been a big economic magnet for the state and the like. I pushed hard to try to get help for a lot of those folks with PPP and the like, and there were challenges with that. But that's going to have to be part of the next package as well, based on what I saw today. If that story is right, that they've been flooded with, applications and they're going to need more funds. So.
Yeah, that's what I had heard. And so what are the odds of more funds?
Well, I think that small restaurants, because they're in every senator's hometown and dotted all over hither and yon, are going to be pretty vociferous, voices. And I think we got a pretty good shot at getting additional funds. That's why it's important. And I just saw the number. It's only been operational for a few days and it's already been flooded with applications.
Right. Has there been talk about spreading it to similar travel and event related
Well,
enterprises?
we did early on have some help for venues and the like. I was able to get some assistance for Shakespeare Festival and places that were nonprofits. We're gonna be digging out from this for a long time to come. The question has always been, and I hear a lot about this, from my wife, who's a small business owner. When there is vaccination widespread, we're gonna have a lot of people coming back to retail. And that's a big economic multiplier. You have people vaccinated, they come back to retail. There's a bigger demand for goods and services, and marketplace forces, kick in. And we're starting to see some of that in some parts of the country. Particularly hard hit has been the Willamette, Valley, and the Oregonian has documented it. It's why I'm bearing down so hard on incentives for small business, technology, clean energy, infrastructure, healthcare costs. All of them go into the funds for vaccinations and getting schools open. All of them go back into the kind of frame that you get people vaccinated, you start seeing demand for goods and services, they start hiring, it becomes a big multiplier, and we've got a real opportunity, I think, for growth. There's considerable discussion about, well, is this going to trigger some big inflationary run? Certainly there's been a bump here in the last couple of weeks, but there's an awful lot of room for growth here. A lot of room for growth that I think will reflect the productivity gains that we want for the country and not get us into some huge inflationary tailspin.
Oh, I think we all hope that that's right. I really like
and
hearing.
Jerome Powell was a good choice for the Federal Reserve. What you want at the Federal Reserve is somebody who knows when the punch bowl comes out and when the punch bowl comes in. And I think he struck a good balance.
All good. All good. So last question for you, Senator. I want to again talk about Oregon, but this time not small business, this time more of our semiconductor business sector work. And as you know, we're one of the leading centers in the world for semiconductor research, design, and production. And this is now in the limelight on the federal agenda. So can you give us your thoughts about what this means for the future of this industry, specifically in Oregon?
Well, we all know that Intel's our largest private sector employer. And I've made it very clear to the leadership on both sides of the aisle that I'll have a robust package of tax incentives to boost domestic chip making, which is, of course, what Oregon is all about. Enable the research, design, and manufacturing of advanced semiconductors to be at home. And there are going to be two pieces to the puzzle. One will probably start this week, where a number of parts of the country have been interested in grants to chip makers. I believe, maybe this reflects my view of how you really change the incentives and generate growth in the private sector, that the tax code is a better and sturdier tool than grants that are easy to take and take back and the like. And so I think if they were here, Mr. Geisinger and others, were here from Intel, they would tell you that they're really looking at those tax incentives. That's my job. It's not Joe's job or Sally's job or somebody else's job. That's my job as the chairman of the finance committee, and we're going to make it happen.
Excellent. Excellent.
And I've got a lengthy closing address too, Penny. And, you know, by this time, probably your guests are cringing. You know, if a chairman of a committee says they're going to give a closing address, you sit back in your chair and they're really ghastly affairs. They're just horrible. So I'm just going to say two things. Just say, number one, thank you to you and everybody who is doing this important work with the business plan. And second, I want everybody to know that the Oregon way, even though we've got huge challenges, and we're heartbroken, for example, about some of the stuff that we see downtown. Don't bet against our state. We always find a way to be resilient, to come back, and we've got great days ahead of us. And part of it is what we've been talking about today. Hadn't been a bad question in the House, not a single one. Thank you for the good work that you're doing, and anybody who bets against Oregon is on their way to making a big mistake. We've got a lot of opportunities in the days ahead. We haven't even talked about some of what I think we can do in terms of recreation. Recreation, huge economic engine. I introduced something called the River Democracy Act. No state has ever proposed doing such a thing. So Oregon's got a lot of good days ahead. And thanks everybody. To be continued.
Awesome. Thank you, Senator. Now to Joth for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Senator Wyden, for your time and insights and just amazing commentary. I mean, to have a senator at that level representing our state and working for our country is just absolutely amazing. So we'd like to thank our partners at Oregon Business and Industry and the Portland Business Alliance for the collaboration on this event as well. This concludes our federal legislative briefing and discussion series. To watch all the events in this series, please visit OregonBusinessPlan.org. And most importantly, have a fabulous Friday afternoon and a great weekend. Thank you for joining us.